Hey guys, and welcome to Narratives and Tidbits. Hey, I know that I have been missing for some weeks, but I'm back. I'm here. Thank you for all of your support. If you're new here, hello. I am your host, So Southern. If you're returning, thank you guys so much for the love. Love you back. Guys, we have this in this episode, we have quite a bit of ground to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. In today's episode, I'm going to tell you about a case that involves a very well-known, well-respected man in DeKalb County, Georgia, and he was assassinated just a couple of days before he was sworn in as sheriff. I mean, we're talking big egos, corruption, and political revenge. Let me take you back. The year 2000, December the 15th to be exact. This is the case of Lieutenant Derwin Brown. Lieutenant Derwin Brown, born June the 22nd, 1954 in Fort Knox, Kentucky, but he was raised in Long Island, New York by his parents, Bervina and George Brown. Derwin later moved to DeKalb County, Georgia, and first served as a youth counselor for troubled teens. And soon after, he became one of the country's first African American patrol officers. He hosted his own local TV segment called The Naked Truth. He also was the author of his own column in the local paper called Champion Newspaper, and it was titled Tell It Like It Is. Now, Brown, he was a very well-liked and well-respected man. Brown also had a 23-year career with the DeKalb County Police Department and was rank of lieutenant. And, during all of this time in his career, he became a husband to Phyllis and a father to 5 children. Okay, so it's Friday, December the 15th of 2000, and it's raining heavily, and the time is close to around 11 p.m. The police are at the home of Lieutenant Derwin Brown, and they discover him at the front of his driveway, bleeding, with his wife Phyllis kneeled by him. Now, it's obvious to the police that Brown was shot multiple times. Once the paramedics arrived, they rushed to get him to the hospital, but shortly after his arrival, he was pronounced dead. At the site of the crime scene, there were no leads, no weapons, or footprints. Now, the only thing that was recovered were shell casings that were on the right side of Lieutenant Brown's car. Now, this whole scene, this is a total shock because Brown was set to be sworn in on Monday, December the 18th as Sheriff of DeKalb County. What has happened? Phyllis Brown, Derwin's wife, she's completely shattered, and understandably so. She tells police that the family, herself included, were at home waiting for Derwin. They began to hear what they initially thought were fireworks from the neighbors, but they quickly realized it was not fireworks and it was gunshots that they were hearing. They all got down on the floor until they didn't hear any more shots. And then that's when Phyllis runs outside to see what's going on. And at that point, she discovers her husband, Derwin, was bleeding in the driveway. And then she calls 911. After Lieutenant Derwin Brown has been pronounced dead, DeKalb County Department showed up at news reporter Dale Cardwell's home to inform him of Brown's homicide and that it is possible that the perpetrator could be seeking to harm him as well. It was strongly advised, that Cardwell and his family needed to go into protective custody. Now, Okay, I know what you're about to ask, or you're asking. Who is Dale Cardwell? Okay, he's the news reporter. But I know your next question. How is he significant to Lieutenant Derwin Brown at all? Stand by. I got you. Okay, let's rewind and go back to the very beginning. DeKalb County, Georgia. Or wait, is it DeKalb or DeKalb? I don't know. You guys let me know in the comment section. I'm going to say DeKalb County, okay? So, okay. Now, DeKalb County is a suburb to the Atlanta area. And in 1996, a veteran homicide detective ran for sheriff and won, becoming the first African American to hold the position in DeKalb, which was a big deal considering the county's demographics at that time. Who was he? His name, Sidney Dorsey. Now, Dorsey had a reputation of being arrogant, being a ladies' man, even though he had a wife, and self-assured. Now, during Dorsey's time as sheriff, he started a private security company called Security Investigations Division, also SID for short, and was known to use his deputies that were on duty to staff private jobs of the Atlanta area for years, which was a problem and everyone knew. Now, he also used inmates to perform labor in Sherry Dorsey's political district. Sherry Dorsey is Sidney's wife. Now, again, everyone knew what was going on, and the deputies were afraid to say anything because they feared for their jobs, and they were just afraid of what Sidney would do to them. I mean, the sheriff is the one that actually runs the town for sure. So no one wanted any problems with Sidney Dorsey. But there was one that wanted to end all of the corruption, and that was Lieutenant Derwin Brown at the DeKalb Police Department. Now it's election season, and Lieutenant Brown has thrown his hat in the race for sheriff. People thought, he was crazy to run against Dorsey. They didn't think he would win because, he was, of course, the underdog. However, Brown ran his campaign and platform on law and order and promised to end corruption. Brown even called out Dorsey on his corruption. I mean, Lieutenant Brown was not afraid of him, unlike many others. Brown wanted to let him know, hey, and the criminal activities had to stop, and he was that guy to get the job done. Okay, so now it's election day, and the race was so close. Dorsey almost won, but in a difference in 300 votes, it forced a runoff between the men, which lasted for around 3 weeks. So during this time, Lieutenant Brown continued to expose Dorsey. He exposed, that the deputies were still doing private jobs, even escorting Dorsey's kids to Disney World. The public, of course, is paying attention to all of this. And now Brown, he wants all of this to be exposed in the media. So he makes a phone call and he contacts reporter Dale Cardwell to report these stories on Dorsey. Now you remember Dale Cardwell was the one that the police suggested that he go into protective custody. That's how there's the connect. So with Cardwell reporting, into the media heavily, Dorsey is being completely exposed, Brown ultimately wins and is the newly elected sheriff in DeKalb. Now, after the runoff victory, Brown did an exclusive interview with Dale Cardwell about the things he wanted to change as sheriff. He talked about how rocky the transition was going and that he wanted to terminate employees from the previous administration that he knew were corrupt. Brown's supporters and transition team, they were against him terminating prior to officially taking office. But Brown wanted to start fresh at the beginning of his term and wanted to, assure the public that he was a man of his word and he meant business. And indeed, he sent out those letters of termination. Talk about a long list of murder suspects. Months go by, and Brown mentioned to a few people at the police headquarters that he felt he was being followed. One day, Brown confronted the person that, was following him. And that person's name, you ask? His name was Patrick Cuffey. And Patrick was a deputy that was on the list to be terminated from the sheriff's office. So, yeah. But anyway, Cuffey actually said when confronted that he was not following him at all, and it was just a coincidence that they were going in the same direction. But the police informed Brown to go ahead and get a surveillance team on Cuffey just to, make sure everything was good. Now get this, though. On December the 15th of 2000, which was the night of the homicide, the surveillance team followed Cuffey and witnessed him getting in a car with another person. Now, they made a couple of intentional turnarounds at the county jail, and their surveillance team thought Cuffey had picked up that he was being followed by them, so they stopped. They stopped following him. And I guess their surveillance team, they figured Cuffey would be taking them through a cat and mouse game, so they just went ahead and killed that surveillance, which I don't know. I think it was a bad call. Now, it wasn't long after this time. One morning around 10 a.m., there was a shootout at Patrick Cuffey's house. Imagine that. And just so happened that this was also the morning Cuffey was terminated from the sheriff's office. My boy had a bad morning. But it was complete chaos that morning, okay? And what happened was it was a drug deal gone wrong, and Cuffey was in the center of it. Now, Cuffey was said to have hidden some evidence and was looking at serious jail time. He was arrested, of course, and while sitting in jail, he wanted to negotiate a plea deal. And in the deal, he would confess to everything that he knew with the drugs, of course, to get a lesser sentence. Now, while he was trying to work on this deal, detectives questioned him about the Lieutenant Derwin Brown homicide. Now, after a couple of weeks, because Cuffey wasn't talking about that, okay? But after a couple of weeks, when he thought about it, he decided to tell everything that he knew, and he would do that only if, in exchange, he would get immunity from the prosecution. That's pretty bold. But guess what? They agreed. Okay, so Cuffey states he and 3 other men were involved in the homicide. He says they didn't want to do it, but they felt pressured to do so because of Sidney Dorsey and for their future careers in law enforcement. Now, the men that were involved were Melvin Walker, Paul Skyers, David Ramsey, and Patrick Cuffey. Cuffey continues to speak with the detectives, and he says in detail that Melvin was the shooter, Paul was the driver, And he and David were the watchmen and backup shooters. And also that Sidney Dorsey, he was the man that orchestrated the entire hit. How about that? Now, Melvin, Paul, and David, they were arrested and charged with murder. And Sidney Dorsey, he turned himself in. Now, Paul, he went for the same plea deal of immunity if he testified to what happened. And guess what? His plea deal was granted as well as Cuffy's. Melvin and David were actually cleared of the charges on the first trial, but when they went to federal court, they both received sentences of life in prison, in federal prison. So, yeah, they ended up having to serve time anyway, which is correct. As Sidney Dorsey's murder trial is approaching, everyone in DeKalb County and surrounding counties all over Atlanta, they knew about this high profile case, which made it hard to actually try the case local. And actually, the case had to be tried in Albany, Georgia. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. It's now June the 17th of 2002, and Sidney Dorsey's trial has started. Patrick Cuffey takes the stand, and he begins with explaining that he admired Sidney Dorsey. He looked at him as a father figure and a role model, and that their relationship was special to him because it was just like a father-son relationship, something that he did not have growing up. Cuffey, he goes on to testify that about 3 months before the homicide, Dorsey called him and requested to see him at his home, Dorsey's home. Once he arrived at his home, they went on the patio and Dorsey handed him a folded up note. The note had "Kill Derwin Brown" written on it. When asked why, he said Derwin was going to kill him. Dorsey took the letter back and he started chewing and swallowed the note. Now, let me go ahead and say, now with that, Dorsey being a former homicide detective, he knew not to leave that type of evidence behind. So I get why he chewed it up and swallowed it. But anywho, at first, he says Dorsey wanted Brown strangled so there wouldn't be a murder weapon, but he changed his mind. Cuffey goes on to testify that Michael Walker, Paul Skyers, David Ramsey, Sidney Dorsey, and himself, they were all in on the murder. He says he felt that, or they all felt that they were under pressure to take care of this, because he didn't want to let his mentor down, and because he and the other officers were promised certain positions at the sheriff's office, but they actually did not want to go through with the hit. Cuffey goes on to say they had been rehearsing a few weeks before the murder actually happened. Dorsey ordered the hit specifically for the night of December the 15th to make sure that the transition of office would not take place that following Monday. And the guys, they actually drew straws to see who would be the shooter. Now, there's another person who took the stand by the name of Shirley McMichael. Shirley testified to a specific meet with Dorsey in August of 2000, where he told her that Brown would never assume the position as sheriff and that a special election would be held that January and that he would be reelected as sheriff. While telling McMichael this, Dorsey placed his hand to his head, gesturing the shape of a gun, pretty much indicating that he would be shot and killed. And after this meeting came the meeting with Cuffey at Dorsey's home. So what really happened on the night of December the 15th of 2000? Well, let me tell you. Lieutenant Brown arrives at the local restaurant after picking up a gift and flowers for Phyllis because it's a celebration of her birthday, along with him getting sworn in as sheriff on that upcoming Monday. Phyllis and the family, they go home like around 9ish. Brown stays, but he ends up leaving around 10:30. By the time he arrives at his home, it's pouring down raining. Brown gets out of the car. As he's walking up the driveway, headed to the front door. He's ambushed by Melvin Walker and is shot 12 times with a Tech 9 handgun. After the shots were fired, that's when Phyllis ran outside and discovered her husband bleeding out. Melvin, Paul, David, and Patrick, they immediately flee the scene. Phyllis calls 911 and Lieutenant Brown was rushed to the hospital where he succumbed to his injuries. This trial lasted an intense full 2 weeks, and on July the 10th of 2002, Sidney Dorsey was found guilty of malice murder, 2 RICO charges, violation of oath of public officer, and 8 counts of theft by taking in violation of duties as a public officer. On August the 15th of 2002, the sentencing took place and Dorsey was sentenced to life without parole on the malice murder charges and 23 years on the RICO charges, and concurrent sentences ranging from 10 to 15 years on the convictions of theft by taking of the oath of office as an elected official. Oof. At the sentencing, Phyllis addressed Dorsey and said, and I quote, "You called him the lowest scumbag on earth? I beg to differ. That is you. That is you. As you watch yourself in the mirror, you are the lowest scumbag on the earth." End quote. At the end of the sentencing, Dorsey claimed he was innocent and that he does not have the blood of Derwin Brown on his hands. But on July the 13th of 2007, he confessed and claimed he tried to stop the hit on Brown, but of course it didn't happen. But he did what he tried to stop it. Okay. Now, you guys tell me what you think of this case. I mean, do you think Patrick Cuffey was really telling the truth? Should he have been given immunity along with Paul Skyers? I don't. Guys, there is so much more to this case and events that happened after, but I will have that in the tidbits video that's coming up soon. So make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you won't miss it. This will definitely be one to watch because, the tidbits, it will actually connect all of the dots in this case. So make sure you check it out. Make sure you check out my other videos and be safe out there. So Southern signing off. Bye.